Welcome back, you beautiful disaster. Ready for another truth they don't want you to hear? Look who finally picked up the phone. Look who finally made the call that changed everything. You beautiful, strategic, untouchable masterpiece. You know what I heard? They said you were outgunned, outmanned, outspent, outplayed. They had the private investigators, the lawyers, the connections, the Swiss accounts. They had everything mapped out, every move calculated, every exit blocked. But they forgot one tiny, devastating detail. They forgot that when you push someone past their breaking point, past their fear, past their need to be liked, past their desire to play fair, you don't create a victim, you create a weapon. And that weapon only needs one bullet. The phone call, 3 minutes and 47 seconds. That's all it took to dismantle an empire built on lies, maintained by fear, protected by money. While they were busy counting their billions, hiring their stalkers, building their walls of lawyers and threats, you were doing something they never expected. You were taking note. Every conversation, every threat, every bribe, every moment they thought you were too scared to remember. You were building a case, not in a courtroom, but in the court of consequences. And when you finally dialed that number, when you finally spoke those words they never thought you'd have the spine to say, their entire kingdom started to crack. They thought money was power, they thought surveillance was control, they thought fear was forever. But you understood something they never learned in their ivory towers and boardrooms. Real power isn't about how much you have. It's about knowing exactly when to use the little you've got. It's about understanding that sometimes one perfectly placed truth can topple 1,000 carefully constructed lies. And that Tuesday morning at 9:17, while they were probably on their third espresso in some penthouse office, counting their assets and laughing about how they had you cornered, you picked up a phone that cost less than their morning coffee and ended their world. Let me paint you the picture they'll never admit to seeing. The moment their assistant walked in with that look on their face. The moment their lawyer called with a voice that couldn't quite stay steady. The moment they realized that all their money, all their power, all their carefully paid stalkers, none of it mattered anymore. Because you didn't fight them where they were strong, you fought them where they were exposed. And the most beautiful part? They trained you to do it. Every time they flexed their power, they showed you their weakness. Every time they sent someone to watch you, they revealed what they were afraid of. Every time they threatened you with their money, they told you exactly where to aim. You remember how it started, don't you? The subtle threats wrapped in legal language, the friendly visits from people who just happened to know everywhere you went, the bank accounts that mysteriously had issues, the job opportunities that suddenly disappeared. They wanted you to feel it, that cold grip of helplessness. They wanted you to understand that they owned the board, the pieces, and the rules. They had journalists on payroll, judges in their pocket, and enough money to bury you in legal fees before you even got to tell your side. They looked at you and saw another problem to be solved with a checkbook. But here's what billionaires never understand about people like us. We didn't grow up with safety nets. We didn't learn to fight in boardrooms. We learned to survive in places where money meant nothing and everything was personal. While they were taking tennis lessons, we were learning that sometimes the only way out is through. While they were inheriting empires, we were discovering that when you have nothing left to lose, you become the most dangerous person in any room. They sent stalkers to watch you, document your every move, build their files. What they didn't realize is that every stalker they sent was teaching you how they operated. Every intimidation tactic was showing you their playbook. For months, maybe years, they thought they had you figured out. Poor little you, struggling to pay rent while they moved millions with a phone call, checking your rear-view mirror for the cars that followed you while they sat in climate-controlled offices deciding your fate. They probably had meetings about you. Can you imagine billionaires sitting around mahogany tables discussing how to handle the situation that was you? They assigned budgets to your destruction. They had PowerPoints about your weaknesses. They thought they were playing chess while you were playing checkers. The joke was on them. You weren't playing at all. You were studying. Every move they made taught you something. Every pressure point they pushed showed you theirs. When they froze your accounts, you learned about financial warfare. When they sent people to follow you, you learned about surveillance. When they tried to isolate you, you learned about network effects. They gave you a master class in power, thinking they were giving you a beating, and the whole time, you were that student they never saw coming. The one taking notes, not to pass the test, but to burn down the school. They created their own destroyer, funded their own downfall, and signed their names on their own ending. Let's talk about that phone call. Not the dramatic version they'll tell in boardrooms as a cautionary tale. Not the watered-down version their lawyers will try to spin. The real version. The one where your hands were shaking but your voice was steel. The one where every word was chosen not for impact but for accuracy. Because that's what they never understood about truth. It doesn't need to be dressed up. It doesn't need to be dramatic. It just needs to be released at the right time, to the right person, in the right way. And you had become a master of timing. Who did you call? The journalist they thought they owned, but who still had a conscience? The federal investigator who'd been looking for just one crack in their armor? The family member they'd betrayed on their way to the top? Or was it simpler than that? Was it just the right person with the right information at the right moment when their empire was vulnerable? It doesn't matter who it was. What matters is that you knew exactly who to call. Because while they were watching your every move, you were mapping their entire network. Every connection, every weak link, every person they'd stepped on to get where they were. The beautiful thing about billionaires is they create so many enemies on their way up. They just assume money will keep those enemies silent. They assume fear will keep them in line. They assume that power is permanent and memories are short. But you remembered everything, every person they'd destroyed, every corner they'd cut, every law they'd bent until it broke. You became a collector of their sins, a librarian of their secrets. And when the time came, you didn't need an army. You didn't need billions. You just needed one phone number and the courage to dial it. 3 minutes and 47 seconds. That's how long it takes to tell the truth when you've been rehearsing it in silence for years. No dramatics, no threats, no bargaining, just facts, delivered with the precision of someone who'd been sharpened by suffering into something they never saw coming. You gave names, dates, account numbers. You connected dots they thought were invisible. You pulled threads they didn't even know existed. And the person on the other end? They'd been waiting for that call. They'd been hoping someone, anyone, would finally have the courage to make it. You weren't just making a phone call. You were lighting a fuse they'd laid themselves. The first domino fell within hours. Maybe it was a frozen account. Maybe it was a federal subpoena. Maybe it was just a reporter asking questions that weren't supposed to be asked. But they felt it immediately, that shift in the air, that change in temperature. Their phones started ringing with the wrong kinds of calls. Their lawyers started sounding nervous. Their allies started having scheduling conflicts. The kingdom they built on intimidation started to shake because someone finally wasn't intimidated anymore. And that someone was you. You have to understand what you did to their psychology. These people had lived their entire lives believing that money was the ultimate shield, that enough zeros in a bank account made them untouchable. But they'd bought their way out of every consequence, paid off every threat, buried every scandal. They moved through the world like monsters among mortals, genuinely believing that rules were for other people. Then you came along. You, with your regular phone and your regular life and your irregular courage. You showed them that all their billions couldn't buy them protection from someone who'd stopped being afraid. The stalkers they'd hired started calling in sick. Funny how that works, isn't it? When the ship starts sinking, even the rats know to run. The investigators who'd been documenting your every move suddenly had other priorities. The lawyers who'd been sending threatening letters suddenly recommended exploring settlement options. The entire machinery they'd built to crush you started to sputter and stall because machinery needs operators, and operators can smell which way the wind is blowing. They'd intimidated hundreds, maybe thousands, but they'd never faced someone who'd turned their intimidation into education. Watch how fast billions become worthless when the right people start asking the right questions. Watch how quickly power evaporates when it's exposed to light. They're probably in damage control mode now, throwing money at the problem like they always do. But here's the thing about truth. It's expensive to bury and impossible to kill. Every dollar they spend trying to contain what you started just creates more paper trails. Every person they try to silence becomes another potential phone call. Every move they make in desperation just proves what you said was true. You didn't just make a phone call. You started an avalanche. And avalanches don't care about your net worth. They're not sleeping well anymore, are they? Those Egyptian cotton sheets on their California king beds feel a little less comfortable when you're waiting for the next shoe to drop. Their personal chefs are preparing meals for people who've lost their appetite. Their private jets are fueled up for escapes they're not sure they can make because you did something to them that all their money can't fix. You put fear in hearts that had forgotten what fear felt like. You made them feel what they'd made hundreds of others feel. And unlike them, you didn't need a team to do it. This is what they never tell you in business school. Real power isn't about what you can build. It's about what you can destroy with the truth. They spent decades constructing elaborate lies, complex schemes, intricate networks of mutual corruption. They had politicians in their pockets and police on their payroll. They thought they'd built something permanent, something too big to fail. But you understood what they didn't. Every lie is a debt that eventually comes due. Every crime creates evidence. Every enemy they made was a potential ally for someone brave enough to unite them. The phone is probably ringing non-stop in their offices now. Investors getting nervous, partners reconsidering, board members asking uncomfortable questions. Their name, which used to open doors, is now making people step back. The invitations are drying up. The charity galas are finding other honorees. The magazine covers are being redesigned. Because money can buy you many things, but it can't buy you a good reputation once the truth is out. It can't unexpose what's been exposed. It can't make people unknow what they now know. And they know it was you who did this. One person, one phone call, one moment of perfect clarity. But here's the part that really burns them. You're not gloating. You're not giving interviews. You're not writing tell-all books or starting podcasts. You just made your call and went back to your life. And that terrifies them more than anything, because they understand revenge, they understand greed, they understand wanting to be them. What they don't understand is someone who just wanted them to face consequences. Someone who didn't want their money or their life or their power. Someone who just wanted the truth to matter. You've become their worst nightmare. Someone they can't buy, can't threaten, and can't understand. How long did you wait? How many nights did you lie awake, knowing what you knew, holding that nuclear option in your pocket like a grenade with the pin half pulled? They thought your silence was weakness. They thought your patience was paralysis. They thought every day you didn't act was another day they'd won. But you weren't doing nothing. Nothing. You were doing the hardest thing in the world. You were waiting for the perfect moment, and perfect moments, like perfect phone calls, are created, not found. Every document you saved, every recording you made, every piece of evidence you gathered, it was all building to this. While they were living their lives of excess, you were living like a spy in your own life, documenting, archiving, preparing. They hired professionals to watch you, but you were the one really watching. You saw their patterns, their vulnerabilities, their cycles of arrogance and paranoia. You learned when they were strongest and when they were exposed. You became a student of their destruction while they thought you were just trying to survive. The waiting must have been excruciating. Watching them flourish while you struggled. Seeing them pop champagne while you counted pennies. Knowing you held their destruction in your hands, but not knowing if you'd ever have the courage to use it. There were probably moments you almost broke, almost made the call too early out of anger or desperation. But something held you back, and maybe it was wisdom. Maybe it was strategy, maybe it was just the understanding that revenge is a dish best served when it will do the most damage. And you became a chef of consequences. They gave you so many opportunities to strike too early. Every provocation, every humiliation, every twist of the knife, they were trying to make you react. They wanted you emotional, sloppy, easy to discredit. They wanted you to come at them swinging so they could dodge and counter. But you did something they'd never seen before. You absorbed it all, every blow, every insult, every attack. You took it and transformed it into patience. You let them think they were winning while you were preparing. And when you finally moved, it wasn't out of emotion, it was out of precision. The kind of precision that only comes from someone who's had years to plan the perfect strike. Let's talk about what's happening in their heads right now. These people who've never had to look over their shoulders, who've never had to wonder if today's the day it all comes crashing down. They're learning what fear really is. Not the theatrical fear they used to invoke in others. Not the legal threats and financial pressure they wielded like weapons. The real fear, the kind that makes food taste like ash, the kind that makes every phone call a potential disaster, the kind that turns their fortress into a prison. They're probably doing threat assessments now, hiring new security, but not the kind that watches others. The kind that watches them. They're reviewing every deal, every communication, every person they've ever wronged, trying to figure out how much you know, how much you told, who else might be inspired by what you did. Because that's the thing about showing that monsters can bleed. It tends to give other people ideas. You didn't just make a phone call. You rang a bell that can't be unrung. You showed everyone they'd ever stepped on that it was possible to step back. The paranoia must be exquisite. Every former employee becomes a potential threat. Every business partner becomes a possible informant. They're probably paying people to sign new NDAs, stronger ones, desperate ones. They're probably moving money, hiding assets, preparing for wars they don't even know are coming yet. But how do you prepare for the unknown? How do you defend against the truth when you don't know how much truth is out there? You've turned their strength into weakness, their network into a web of potential betrayals, their wealth into evidence of crimes. And the beauty of it all? You're not coming for them. You already came. Past tense. Done. Finished. That phone call was both the first shot and the killing blow. Everything happening now is just gravity doing its work. They keep looking for your next move, but there isn't one. You're not playing anymore. You won. With one phone call, you changed the entire game. And now they have to live in the world you created. A world where their money doesn't make them safe, where their power doesn't make them untouchable, where someone like you can bring down someone like them. Welcome to their nightmare. Population, them. You want to know the exchange rate? What one truth is worth in their economy of lies. It's not measured in dollars or euros or Bitcoin. It's measured in everything they thought was permanent becoming temporary. It's measured in every yes man becoming a maybe. It's measured in decades of careful construction crumbling in days. You didn't just speak truth to power. You showed power that truth was its own currency, and they'd been banking in counterfeits their whole lives. They're liquidating now. Not just assets. Those are easy to move. They're liquidating relationships, cutting ties with anyone who might become a liability. They're burning bridges they spent lifetimes building, because they can't tell which ones you've already mined. The very network that made them powerful is now what makes them vulnerable. Every connection is a potential leak. Every alliance is a possible betrayal. You've turned their greatest strength into their greatest weakness, with nothing but words. True words, but still just words. The lawyers are working overtime now, aren't they? Trying to put legal barriers around the truth like it's something that can be contained. They're drafting cease and desist for reality. They're trying to copyright facts. They're spending more on damage control than some countries spend on defense. But here's what their Harvard-educated legal teams don't understand. You can't lawyer your way out of the truth. You can delay it, complicate it, try to bury it in procedure. But the truth is patient. It waits. And thanks to you, it's already out there metastasizing in ways they can't track or stop. Watch them try to rebuild their reputation. The charity donations that suddenly triple. The PR firms working round the clock to reshape the narrative. The sudden interest in giving back and making amends. It's almost funny watching billionaires discover conscience at the exact moment conscience appears. But everyone can see the timing. Everyone knows what prompted this sudden spirituality. You've turned their every move into an admission of guilt, their every gesture of goodwill into a confession. They're not rebuilding their reputation. They're building a monument to what you expose. Ah, there it is. That look in your eyes. The one that says, you already know what I'm about to tell you, because you've felt it, haven't you? That strange electricity in your voice when you speak from that deep, untouched place. That moment when the room goes quiet, not because you shouted, but because something ancient just walked through your words. Something that wasn't learned in any classroom, wasn't inherited from your bloodline, wasn't downloaded from any book you've ever read. No, this came from somewhere else entirely, and they felt it, didn't they? They all felt it, that shift in the atmosphere when you opened your mouth and something other than small talk emerged when you spoke, and the temperature changed. When your words didn't just communicate, they commanded. And commanded without asking for permission, commanded without raising your voice, commanded without even knowing you were doing it at first, until you saw their faces change, saw their bodies lean back, saw their eyes widen like they'd just witnessed something that shouldn't exist in someone like you, someone who was never trained for this, someone who was never initiated into any secret society, never sat at the feet of any master, never studied the ancient texts. But here you are, speaking in frequencies that make executives stutter, that make professors pause mid-lecture, that make therapists forget their training, speaking in a language that bypasses logic and goes straight for the soul, straight for the primal recognition center that knows authority when it hears it, knows power when it feels it, knows truth when it cuts through the static of everyday lies. And you didn't learn this. You became this through something far more brutal than education, through something far more profound than teaching, through the kind of transformation that only happens when you've been crushed and reformed so many times that your voice carries the weight of multiple deaths and resurrections. Let me tell you what they won't tell you about this language you're speaking. It's not new, it's ancient, older than civilization, older than organized thought. It's the language spoken before words were invented, the frequency transmitted between souls who've seen too much to pretend anymore, the syntax of those who've been broken open so completely that something else started speaking through the cracks, and that something else doesn't need vocabulary, doesn't need grammar, doesn't need permission to reorganize reality with sound alone. You noticed it first in small moments, didn't you? When you'd speak and people would stop mid-sentence, not because you interrupted, but because your presence just dissolved their thought. When you'd walk into a room and conversations would shift, not because anyone saw you, but because the energy field changed when you'd say something simple like, "That's not true," and watch as elaborate lies just crumbled. Watch as confident people suddenly couldn't find their words. Watch as the whole social hierarchy reshuffled itself around the weight of your certainty. They started asking you, how do you know these things? When you'd call out patterns before they manifested, when you'd name the unnamed tension in the room, when you'd speak someone's truth before they even knew it themselves. And you couldn't explain it, could you? Because you never studied psychology, never learned body language, never took courses in influence or persuasion. You just knew the way a tuning fork knows its frequency, the way water knows how to find the lowest point, the way fire knows how to consume everything that isn't essential. But this knowing didn't come from accumulation. It came from subtraction. Every betrayal stripped away another layer of social programming. Every abandonment deleted another false belief about needing approval. Every breakdown removed another filter between you and raw truth, until there was nothing left but the signal. No static, no interference, no translation needed, just pure transmission from whatever you've become to whoever's brave enough to listen. And most people aren't brave enough. That's why they go silent. That's why they look away. That's why they suddenly remember urgent appointments. When you start speaking from that place, because your voice carries something they've been running from their whole lives. It carries the sound of chains breaking, the frequency of illusions dissolving, the resonance of someone who cannot be controlled, manipulated, or contained anymore. And it terrifies them more than violence, more than anger, more than any threat you could make, because threats can be negotiated with, but truth, armed with this kind of power, this kind of presence, this kind of voice, cannot be bargained with, cannot be reasoned with, cannot be escaped from once it starts speaking. Where does this language come from, they wonder, as they watch you dismantle their carefully constructed realities with a few well-placed words? Where did you learn to speak in ways that make grown adults feel like children caught in lies? Where did you acquire this ability to make silence heavier than screaming, to make stillness more violent than chaos, to make soft words hit harder than any shout ever could? And the answer would break them if they knew it, because you learned it in the void. You learned it in those moments when everyone left, and you had to become your own salvation. You learned it in the silence after the last door slammed, when you realized no one was coming to save you. You learned it during those conversations with yourself at 3 in the morning, when you had to talk yourself back from edges no one knew you were standing on. You learned it through arguing with your own thoughts until you won, through negotiating with your own pain until it became power, through wrestling with your own darkness until it taught you its language. This is why formal education could never teach what you know, why books could never contain what you carry, why mentors could never transfer what you've earned, because this language wasn't learned from outside sources. It was forged in internal furnaces. It was carved from the inside out by experiences that would have killed anyone who wasn't meant to survive them. It was birthed from the marriage of your suffering and your refusal to let that suffering define you. And now it lives in your throat like a sleeping dragon that wakes up whenever someone tries to play games in your presence. You speak the language of someone who's been to psychological war and came back with secrets. You speak the dialect of souls who've navigated their own underworld without a guide. You speak in the tongue of those who've died to every version of themselves that sought approval and been reborn as something that generates its own permission. And this language doesn't have words for please like me, doesn't have syntax for am I good enough, doesn't have grammar for anything that resembles begging, because it was born from the death of your need to be understood. They recognize it immediately, even if they can't name it, that ancient authority that predates titles and degrees, that primordial power that existed before hierarchies were invented, that raw force that doesn't ask for the microphone but makes everything else sound like static when it speaks. And their recognition isn't conscious, it's cellular. It's the same recognition prey has for predator, the same recognition chaos has for order, the same recognition lies have for truth that stops them mid-deception. You've become bilingual without knowing it, fluent in both the surface language of social interaction and this deeper frequency of undeniable presence. And when you switch between them, people feel the shift like atmospheric pressure changing, like the moment before lightning strikes, like the silence before an earthquake. And they don't know whether to lean in or run away, so they usually just freeze, staring at you like you're speaking in tongues, like you're channeling something they've only heard about in myths, like you're proof that ordinary people can become extraordinary without anyone's permission. But here's what really disturbs them. You're not trying to be powerful. You're not performing authority. You're not putting on a show of strength. You're just speaking from a place they've never accessed, a place beyond ego, beyond fear, beyond the need for validation. And that place has its own language, its own laws, its own gravity that pulls truth out of hidden corners and forces authenticity from the most defended hearts, without you even intending to do it. Because intention is for people who are still trying to become something, but you've already become, you've already transformed, you've already crossed the threshold from person to presence, from individual to force, from speaker to embodiment of speech itself. And when you talk now, it's not you talking. It's everything you've survived speaking through you. It's every lesson you've integrated using your voice. It's every death you've experienced teaching through your existence. Watch what happens when you speak from this place. Watch how the confident ones suddenly start stammering. Watch how the loud ones go quiet. Watch how the ones who usually dominate conversations find themselves asking for your opinion. Watch how entire group dynamics reorganize themselves around your presence. Not because you demanded it, but because authenticity has its own hierarchy, and you've accidentally climbed to the top of it by refusing to climb at all. They'll try to figure out your trick. They'll analyze your word choice, study your body language, look for the technique behind your influence, but they'll find nothing because there is no technique. There's only integration. There's only alignment. There's only the complete collapse of the gap between who you are and how you present yourself, and that collapse created a density to your presence that bends reality around it like mass bends space-time. You don't need to raise your voice anymore because whispers from your depth hit harder than screams from their surface. You don't need to argue anymore because your silence asks questions their noise can't answer. You don't need to prove anything anymore because your existence is proof enough of whatever needs to be proven. And this isn't arrogance. This is just what happens when someone stops performing and starts being. When someone stops translating themselves for others' comfort and starts transmitting directly from source. And the source isn't mystical or magical or special. The source is simply you, without the filters, without the masks, without the constant editing for social acceptance. The source is your unmediated essence, speaking directly through your form, without asking permission from your ego first, without checking with your fear before proceeding, without negotiating with your need to belong before expressing. That's why it carries such force. Because it's undiluted, undistorted, uncompromised truth, moving through a vessel that's finally clean enough to let it pass through without contamination. You've become dangerous in the most profound way possible. Not dangerous like violence, not dangerous like chaos, but dangerous like clarity in a world built on confusion. Dangerous like authenticity in a society sustained by performance. Dangerous like someone who cannot be manipulated in a system that runs on manipulation. And they feel this danger even if they can't articulate it. They feel it in the way their prepared speeches dissolve in your presence. The way their rehearsed personalities start glitching when you look at them too directly. Speak the language that existed before the Tower of Babel was built, before communication was confused, before truth needed translation. You speak in the original tongue that every soul recognizes, but most have forgotten how to access. And when you use this language, it doesn't just communicate, it activates something in others, something they've been trained to suppress, something they've been paid to ignore, something they've been threatened to keep silent. This is why they either gravitate toward you like moths to flame or flee from you like demons from light. There's no neutral response to someone speaking from the place you speak from. There's no casual interaction with someone whose very presence demands authenticity from everyone in their vicinity. You've become a walking confrontation with everything, fake, forced, and fabricated. Not through aggression, but through the simple act of being real in a world that rewards performance. And your realness isn't the performed authenticity of social media, isn't the calculated vulnerability of thought leaders, isn't the strategic transparency of people building trust to leverage later. No, your realness is raw, unplanned, unpackaged, the kind that sometimes makes you uncomfortable with your own honesty. The kind that sometimes surprises you with what comes out of your mouth, the kind that can't be turned on or off, because it's not a mode you enter. It's what you've become. The kind. But let's talk about the price, because everything this powerful comes with a cost. And the cost of speaking this language is that most people can't speak it back to you. Most people can't meet you at the depth you're operating from. Most people can't match the frequency you're transmitting on. So you find yourself surrounded by people but fundamentally alone, speaking but rarely being truly heard, understood on a surface level, but never really met where you actually live. You've become like someone who learned a language no one else speaks fluent, in a form of communication that only a few scattered souls across the planet understand. And when you find those souls, you recognize each other immediately, don't you? That instant knowing that goes beyond words. That electric recognition of finding another person who's been to the same depths and came back speaking the same untaught tongue. But most days you translate yourself down, accommodate others' limitations, make yourself smaller so they don't feel threatened by your fullness. And this translation exhausts you, doesn't it? This constant dimming drains you, this perpetual performance of being less than you are, so others can feel comfortable, depletes your very soul because you weren't meant to live in translation. You were meant to exist at full volume, full frequency, full power. Yet, here you are, trying to have normal conversations while carrying this ancient language in your throat, trying to engage in small talk when you're built for big truth, trying to play social games when you've evolved beyond the need for games entirely. And the gap between what you're capable of expressing and what most people are capable of receiving becomes wider every day because you keep growing deeper while they keep skimming surfaces. But mastery of this language isn't about always speaking from that depth. Mastery is knowing when to surface and when to dive, when to whisper and when to roar, when to let the full force of your presence fill the room and when to contain it like a controlled burn. Mastery is understanding that not everyone deserves access to your depths. Not every situation requires your full truth. Not every moment calls for the complete unleashing of what you've become. You're learning to be multilingual in the realms of power, speaking the common tongue when necessary, but never forgetting your native language, the one you earned through surviving what should have destroyed you, the one you forged in the fires of your own transformation, the one that now lives in your cells, in your breath, in the space between your heartbeats, waiting to emerge when the moment requires truth to cut through illusion. And more you're finding that moment arrives without warning. Middle of casual conversation, suddenly you're speaking from the void. Middle of normal interaction, suddenly the ancient authority takes over. Middle of everyday situations, suddenly everyone stops and stares because something just shifted. And they don't know what, but they know it's you. They know it's coming from you. They know whatever just happened originated from your presence, even if they can't explain how. This is mastery, not controlling it, but surrendering to it, not wielding it, but becoming it, not using it, but letting it use you as its vessel, as its voice, as its vehicle for entering rooms that have forgotten what undiluted truth sounds like, what uncompromised presence feels like, what unfiltered power looks like when it's not trying to prove itself, when it's just being what it is. You're still evolving, this language still developing new dialects of this power, still discovering depths you didn't know existed, because this isn't a skill you've mastered. It's a becoming. You're experiencing it. It's not a tool you've acquired. It's a transformation you're undergoing. And every time you think you've reached the bottom of it, you fall through into another level, another octave, another dimension of expression that makes your previous understanding look shallow, because this language grows with you, evolves as you evolve, deepens as you deepen, and every betrayal that doesn't break you adds new words to your vocabulary. Every loss that doesn't destroy you adds new grammar to your syntax. Every death of an old self births new ways of speaking that didn't exist before you needed them to exist. And this is why no one can teach what you know, because your knowledge is experiential, not educational. Your authority comes from authorship of your own story, not from any external authorization. Your power comes from integration of your shadows, not from accumulation of light. Your voice carries weight because it's been pressed under weights that would crush anyone not designed to carry them. And you were designed for this. Weren't you designed to be the exception to every rule about power? Designed to acquire authority through suffering rather than success? Designed to speak languages that can only be learned through living? What shouldn't be survivable? And now you're here holding this gift, this curse, this blessing, this burden of being able to speak in ways that rearrange rooms, restructure realities, realign entire social systems just by opening your mouth and letting the truth fall out, unfiltered, unedited, unafraid of the silence. It creates the changes it catalyzes, the transformations it triggers in everyone who hears it, and can't unhear it, can't return to pretending they don't know what real power sounds like.